Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 26th of October 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. That's mailbox at cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is XCOM Enemy Unknown. It is unknown what bugs will pop out at you whenever you load up the game. It's a new and exciting experience every time. First email comes in here from Zez that says, lately there's been this drama going around with the publication of an image where Jeff Keighley is sitting beside a Halo 4 poster, a table of Doritos, and an energy drink, that being Mountain Dew, I might add, does that really count as an energy drink? Maybe the Code Red variant does, I don't know. Rob Florence, former writer for Eurogamer, made an article about what this image depicts of video game journalism. It's been known via Twitter that this article was his last one for Eurogamer. The original work mentioned Lauren Wainwright and was edited to remove the paragraph that did so due to complaints on her part. I would like to know your thoughts on the image, the article, and the decisions made by Lauren and Eurogamer regarding these. This is a goddamn mess, is what it is, which is appropriate, considering that's how I would actually view the industry of gaming journalism. It is a complete and total mess across the board, and that includes people like myself, Jesse, and pretty much anyone else on YouTube that talks about games in any kind of critical fashion. So, the whole story, just to kind of cap it off in a nutshell, was written by Rob Florence on the 24th of October. It has since been edited. They had to take a paragraph out due to complaints from this woman that you mentioned here by the name of Lauren Wainwright. And he made some comments about her saying an awful lot of really, really positive things about Tomb Raider, like hashtagging and doing all sorts of stuff like that, which is a rather odd thing to do if you happen to be a journalist, as far as I'm concerned. And turns out that this person is currently involved in some freelance work for Square Enix, who are the publisher of the new Tomb Raider. So you can think, hang on a second, this seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest, especially when this person also freelances for games journalism sites such as IGN. So that made me scratch my head, certainly, but apparently you're not allowed to say that, it would seem. Well, whatever the case, the problem with the games journalism industry is a problem of perception. The problem is that a lot of people think that the entire industry is bought and paid for. The problem with that idea is that they generally don't understand why. They actually think that there is a brown envelope that is slipped to journalists and says, $5,000 gives me a 95% score, right? No, it's actually far more subtle than that, and the practices of the industry tend to surround the idea of influencing journalists rather than directly giving them money to say something. So, ways in which the games journalism industry is influenced include the idea of review embargoes dependent on score. There have been certain cases whereby early reviews were allowed on the basis that they gave the game a certain score, and you will generally never see an early review of anything that is below, say, an 85. It just will not happen. Why? Because they're not going to give you permission to do it. Either all the reviews are going to come out at once. That means the embargo is over. Every title, at least every major title, some indies don't. Some people just send me indies and say, hey, just do this. I'm like, okay. Although there are actually some indies that also have an embargo. If you can believe it, Rocket Bird's Hard Boiled Chicken actually had an embargo agreement on it. Good God. But yeah, all the majors have embargoes. And the point of the embargo is to prevent information leaking prior to a certain time. Now, this kind of benefits both the journalist and the company. The reason it benefits the journalist is it gives the journalist time to actually get the damn thing together. And this is because there are now many ways of expressing your opinion on a game, whether it be to go on a podcast and talk about it, you can do a video about it, it could either be a properly edited and cut review, or it could just be a first impressions, it could be written. There are so many different ways of doing it, and not all of them take the same amount of time and effort. So the idea of the embargo is, well, we give you all this game a couple of weeks beforehand, the embargo lifts a couple of days beforehand, and then that means you've got plenty of time to do your actual job, which is good. But it's also beneficial to the company that places the embargo. Why? Well, it's really quite simple. The idea is that the more information you limit prior to the game coming out, the more that people have to rely on your marketing and very carefully controlled previews in order to actually make a decision whether or not to buy. And as you get closer to the release date, especially if there happens to be a pre-order incentive, then more people just cave and actually buy the thing. Unfortunately, it's anti-consumer. The embargo doesn't actually help consumers in many ways at all. I am a very large proponent of the idea that you should show a game at every stage of development, show its development and the changes that are occurring throughout it, and give a lot of access to people that can be trusted to actually be honest and just share the game with the public. And I feel that when you do that, you actually build a bond of trust between your company, your product, and of course the consumers who are hopefully going to be buying it. If you don't do that, and you rely an awful lot on flashy marketing, the game ends up being complete pants, then you are going to lose that trust, and people are going to become more wary of your actual product. Not to mention, it doesn't actually help the journalists or the commentators in any way, shape, or form if you're closing that content off from them. Anyway, that's just one way that influence is applied. There are some other ways. One of them is actually the idea that they have PR launch events and parties. There are a ton of parties. These happen at pretty much every big event that they know there's going to be an awful lot of journalists at. I've been invited to a number of them. I've attended precisely none of them. And the reason for that is that they are a waste of goddamn time. They're usually done in very loud nightclubs, which means that you can't network, connect, or talk to anybody whatsoever without, of course, screaming your lungs out, which is not particularly pleasant. They are just a waste of time, not to mention the fact that you can't really do your job properly at an event if you're getting completely smashed every night and not getting enough sleep. Those who actually work events properly and don't just pop in for 2 hours every day for a little press show and then leave know that these events are very, very hard going. They're long hours. You have to do an awful lot of walking, lugging around a lot of equipment. You have to be on the ball 100% of the time, and it's a very, very stressful environment. Launch events are equally pointless. There's no reason for a journalist to be at a launch event. None. The journalists should have already got access to and put out their content, or at least pre-prepared their content prior to the game coming out. So why the hell should a journalist be at a launch event? And yet many of them are. What is going on with that? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's just the idea of influence. It's about getting buddy-buddy with the journalists to the point where those journalists are going to be less willing to actually attack the company or the product in question for a sketchy decision or just putting out a bad product. Now, the real problem with the industry right now is that we're in this state of flux where the traditional journalism model is being outphased, outpaced, and outviewed by a newer form of media. And this is a very byline-focused commentary. And the idea is that someone you trust on YouTube is going to talk about a video game. And it's that simple. The problem with this is, of course, that there are no standards. None. Zero. The only standard is whether or not people will watch it. It is very much a popularity contest. You can put out any content you want as long as you can convince people that it's actually worth watching. And this is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it means pretty much anyone can break through with a new style and actually make it successful as long as they're able to get the audience for it. There are no traditional restrictions there. The bad thing is that it means an awful lot of tat ends up making it through because a lot of people really enjoy the lowest common denominator schlock. Where things get really hazy is when you consider what role these people actually play. If I'm commentating on a video game, does that make me a journalist, a commentator, a personality? Which one? Well, the thing is, it's kind of all three, and the problem is that those roles are not identical. A journalist may have a very specific set of standards and principles that they must adhere to. A commentator is a little bit different, a personality even more so. A personality should actually be at those launch events because they're all about showing their face in person, about getting this exclusive content. It's very much personality driven. It's not necessarily about getting the real meat. It's not about really in-depth interviews. It's about appearing at these events and actually doing fun stuff. That's what a personality would do. I would say that someone like Toby Turner is a personality. You see him in an awful lot of these events doing silly stuff, and he's doing that in order to entertain people. The commentator has a different role as well. You're talking about someone that is not necessarily there just to provide a purely objective journalistic viewpoint on a certain product. A commentator may end up actually playing the game, commentating the game in question for a large number of videos, an example, of course, being StarCraft 2 esports commentary, or they may even end up being hired by a particular company in order to commentate their game, in the same way that I do the stuff with PlanetSide 2. SOE approached me, knowing that I was very interested in PlanetSide 2, having been a massive player of PlanetSide 1. I talk about it all the time. I mean, you guys know about that. And our interests happened to align there. I wanted access to PlanetSide. They wanted somebody to expose PlanetSide to a wider audience, so I did just that. Now, this, to me, is where things get really awkward. Because if I'm supposed to be all three of those things, what the hell kind of standards am I supposed to adhere to? And how am I supposed to prove that I'm unbiased? How am I supposed to prove, for instance, that I'm unbiased towards PlanetSide 2 if SOE has paid me to do a job? Now, is it wrong for me to take that job? What is my role? If I was strictly a journalist, yes, it would be wrong for me to take that job, but I'm not, though. I'm technically a YouTube commentator, and an awful lot of people actually are, and yet the journalistic stuff is getting outmoded, outdated, and outviewed by people that just do what I do. So this is the place that we're going, and it's a really weird place indeed. And I'm not gonna lie, I think as a YouTube commentator, you are very, very vulnerable to being influenced in some way. Whether it be the idea that you've been given free stuff, you've been given access. Access is a very flattering thing. That's something you've got to understand. YouTube commentators are often individuals that have risen up rather quickly, and being given access to this stuff essentially is a fanboy's dream. It's not even just the case of a fanboy's dream. If you are into gaming and you get access to the development process, that is a very privileged thing. That is something that no doubt a lot of you would really love to do. And I am someone who obviously really loves to do that. And I think that it has value to the viewer as well as to me. But, God, trying to balance all of that and still remain objective is very, very difficult. It's also rather hard to express my opinion on the matter without being accused of being a hypocrite for one reason or another. I'm generally very honest about when a company wants to fly me out to an event and do something. I tell you about it. It's like, hey, I'm going to go to do SOE Live. SOE are paying me to do that. And of course, you know, it's my time. They're paying for my time away from the channel. So it makes perfect sense. I don't do events for free because I can't afford to. Me leaving you guys for a few days actually does a lot of damage to the channel and the audience. You don't just all immediately come back. There's actually a dip in analytics that can last for weeks as opposed to just a couple of days where content didn't come out. So it's a very big concern for me. I need to be compensated. At the end of the day, I run a business. If that business fails, then I'm in an awful lot of trouble. Now, you can believe me or you could not believe me. I mean, it's really up to you. And this is, I think, where things start to get really important. It's about the person behind the content. It's about the byline. It's about the guy writing it, speaking about it, creating videos about it. That's the guy who matters, and it's his reputation that's on the line if he decides that he wants to sacrifice his integrity for the almighty dollar. Now, let me tell you this. YouTube viewers are very fickle. And that might sound like a bad thing, but actually it can be considered a good thing to some degree. Why? Because they will hold you to account for everything you do. Sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes they will complain about all sorts of stupid stuff that, quite frankly, you shouldn't be being criticized for. But it also means that they will keep an eye on your reputation. If you decide that it's worth sacrificing your reputation and integrity for money, then let me tell you this, you will only do it once. Once people figure out that it happened, you are done for. There is a huge amount of competition in this space now, and screwing up can be a death sentence even if it only happens once. Because YouTube-based commentary and games journalism is so personality-driven, way more so than pretty much any other website, I would say. I would say maybe Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Giant Bomb are on that level, but you've got to understand why Giant Bomb is on that level specifically, because they actually do an awful lot of stuff, which is pretty much YouTube commentary. The quick looks, and of course the interactivity with the podcast, the amount of video live streaming they do, is very new media. It's very much about accessing the personality behind the writing. And I know what Jeff Gerstmann likes, I know what Ryan Shoemaker likes, I know what Vinny Caravella likes. I know this stuff because I have listened to so much of their material and I've watched so many quick looks and so many live streams that I can get an impression of what they're going to say about a game before they even open their mouth. And that's why the byline is so important, and that's also why protecting your integrity and your reputation is important in this particular business. I think that, honestly, games journalism in its current state, you can cry from the rooftops about how it needs to change, but I can tell you this, it's not going to. It's going to die. The traditional form of gaming journalism is on its way out. It's already falling across the board. Views for magazines, which of course are the first to go, are just there at an all-time low. They really are, and written reviews will follow that, no doubt. The influence of Metacritic, I think, is probably the only thing which is keeping a lot of these written reviews relevant. There are some sites that continue to do pretty well. Giant Bomb is obviously one of them, but they rely mostly on their video library and not their written reviews. RPS does well because it is incredibly well written by people that have a lot of respect and an awful lot of background in this particular industry. But if you ask me where else I would go if you wanted trustworthy and well done traditional reviews, I couldn't come up with any other names. There are some sites that occasionally do it well, but often do stuff that can be considered particularly dumb or just isn't particularly good quality. And then of course there are the complete rags like Kotaku that are just garbage all the way across the board. Games journalism is a goddamn irredeemable mess. And I don't think that the way that we're going with the whole YouTube commentary thing is necessarily good. I'm not saying that this is saving the day when it comes to games journalism. It's not. There is a huge potential for abuse in this particular industry. A massive potential for exploitation, lying, bribery, and all sorts of different things. It only takes one savvy PR guy to turn a YouTube personality into a shill. It's not even necessarily the case that the commentator will even be aware that it's happening. And that's really, really dangerous. So let me ask you a favor. If you ever think that I'm going in that direction, then please do let me know. Because I am consistently concerned about my relationship with SOE. It allows me to bring you great content when it comes to PlanetSide 2 and hopefully after that other games. It allows me to go out to events, to meet a lot of cool people, and to bring you some really awesome content. It also, of course, allows me to make a living just like the YouTube channel does. But if it ever seems that I'm becoming unnecessarily biased towards PlanetSide 2, and it seems like I'm glossing over problems when in a critical setting, I'm not necessarily just talking about the esports commentary when we're talking about the gameplay and things like that. I'm talking about the idea that I create a video on my channel that glosses over problems and makes excuses for a company like SOE, then please, for the love of God, call me on it. I think it's very important to have a vigilant fan base because despite good intentions, as we're well aware, the road to hell is unfortunately paved with them. A lot of people make a very, very good living indeed from manipulating both consumers and personalities. And it is very difficult to avoid the influence of people like that unless you know that it's actually happening to begin with. This subject is a grim one. It really is. It's sad that this has happened. The fact that this guy got let go from Eurogamer is an absolute and complete disgrace, and hopefully it does wake up an awful lot of sites and consumers to the fact that games journalism is a bloody mess. Unfortunately, it is my view that it cannot be saved. It is beyond salvation at this stage. My advice? Find out the names of the people you trust, whether or not it be their handles or their real names. Do some research. If you read sites like IGN or GameSpot, find out who it was that wrote the reviews that were accurate and actually fitted your opinion. Follow those guys wherever they go, and allow them to provide you content until they screw up. And when they've lost your trust, don't stick with them, go somewhere else. I think it's very important that journalists build up a bond of trust with the consumers, and if they're not able to do that, well, they shouldn't really be in the industry. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. That was a big topic, much requested one, I might add, so it had to be addressed. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. I shall see you next time.